consume their flesh, shatter their bones. Your battle is already lost.
Hello, and welcome to Lorekeeper Sanctum. I am your Lorekeeper, and today's video will bring us back to Thedas as part of my series on the Evanurus of Dragon Age. The topic for today is Gillinan, Mother of the Hala, the chosen of Andruil, goddess of guides and navigation. Gillinan was the last member to join the Evanurus, the ancient elven gods worshipped by the Dalish. She is also the only one of the elven gods who has been mentioned as not having always been divine. In Inquisition, Solas tells us that the Evanurus weren't gods, but powerful mages that had been generals that became kings and then gods.
The Evanurus were elven mages. How did they come to be remembered as gods?
Slowly. It started with a war. War breeds fear. Fear breeds a desire for simplicity. Good and evil, right and wrong, chains of command. After the war ended, generals became respected elders, then kings, finally gods. The Evanurus.
Gillinan is the only one of the Evanurus to be given a physical description. She's described as beautiful, with white hair and the grace of a gazelle. Dalish tales tell that she was a huntress of the people and Andruil's chosen, with some sources stating that she was her beloved. She is remembered as the mother of the Hala, the deer-like animals that pull the Aravels of the Dalish. Her name is invoked by the Dalish who want to travel quickly or whom are lost and need to find their way home. However, there is a much darker history behind her, of her creations, and the monsters she brought forth into the world. Let's take a look at what has been revealed so far in the Dragon Age universe. Spoiler warning. This video will contain major spoilers for the short story, The Horror of Hormak, from the book Tevinter Nights. You have been warned. We will begin our investigation by looking at what has been revealed about Gillinan, starting from the beginning. We will look at the Codex entries and other references and discuss them as we go. In Dragon Age Origins, and again in Inquisition, we get the following Codex entry about her. Gillinan, Mother of the Hala. They say Gillinan was one of the people, in the days before Arlathan, and the chosen of Andruil the Huntress. She was very beautiful, with hair of snowy white, and as graceful as a gazelle. She kept always to Andruil's ways, and Andruil favored her above all others. One day, while hunting in the forest, Gillinan came across a hunter she did not know. At his feet lay a hawk shot through the heart by an arrow. Gillinan was filled with rage, for the hawk, along with the hare, is an animal much beloved of Andruil. Gillinan demanded that the hunter make an offering to Andruil in exchange for taking the life of one of her creatures. The hunter refused, and Gillinan called upon the goddess to curse him, so that he could never again hunt and kill a living creature. Gillinan's curse took hold, and the hunter found that he was unable to hunt. His prey would dart out of sight and his arrows would fly astray. His friends and family began to mock him for his impotence. For what use is a hunter who cannot hunt? Ashamed, the hunter swore he would find Gillinan and repay her for what she had done to him. He found Gillinan while she was out on a hunt with her sisters, and lured her away from them with lies and false words. He told Gillinan that he had learned his lesson and begged her to come with him, so she could teach him to make a proper offering to Andruil. Moved by his plea, Gillinan followed the hunter, and when they were away from all of her sisters, the hunter turned on Gillinan. He blinded her first, and then bound her as one would bind a fresh kill from the hunt. But because he was cursed, the hunter could not kill her. Instead, he left her for dead in the forest. And Gillinan prayed to the gods for help. She prayed to Elgar'nan for vengeance, to Mother Mythal to protect her, but above all, she prayed to Andruil. Andruil sent her hares to Gillinan, and they chewed through the ropes that bound her. But Gillinan was still wounded and blind, and could not find her way home. So Andruil turned her into a beautiful white deer, the first Hala, and Gillinan found her way back to her sisters, and led them to the hunter who was brought to justice. And since that day, the Hala have guided the people, and have never led us astray, for they listened to the voice of Gillinan. From the tale of Gillinan, as told by Gisharel, keeper of the Ralafarin clan of the Dalish Elves. This entry is how the Dalish want to remember Gillinan, and is clearly the work of propaganda, the intentional shifting of a narrative and the image of Gillenane. Here we have a less interesting entry about the Hala and their relationship to the elves, but as the Hala will come up again later, I thought I would include this here. From a codex found in Dragon Age Inquisition. Hala. The first thing you must understand about the Hala is that they are not our servants, they are not our pets, they are our brothers and sisters. Remember that Gillenane, the first Hala and mother of them all, was once a huntress of the people. Without the Hala, there would be no Dalish. The second thing you must understand about the Hala is that you cannot force a Hala to do something against her will. I have heard tales of Shemlin who come across herds and attempt to capture the Hala using ropes and bridles. Many Shemlin have died impaled on horns as a result of this foolishness. Never forget that the Hala once bore our knights into battle. The fierce blood of a warrior still runs through her veins, and she would sooner fight to the death than demean herself. Like the Dalish, the Hala are proud. The Hala knows who she is and will tolerate no being that tells her she is less. How then do we harness them to the Aravels? How do we ride them, or strap our packs to them? Well, how do you get a brother, a sister, or a friend to do you a favor? Simple, isn't it? You ask. If you have a Hala's trust, she will give you her blessing. It's striking that humans never think to ask for a Hala's friendship. But then, they are Shams, and respect nothing. Adara, Hala tender of the Rallifaran clan, to her apprentice. The entry informs us that the Hala are loyal if they are treated with respect, but that they don't like to be dominated. I suppose it could give a clue as to what made Gillenane special before her apotheosis to become one of the Evaneras. I do find the part about them being brothers and sisters to be quite interesting. It makes me wonder how exactly they came to be. Is there some part of them that could be Elven in origin? There is a location in the Exalted Plains called Gillenane's Grove. It appears to contain elven ruins, some statues dedicated to Gillenane, and some monsters, though not particularly the ones found in tales we have been provided with. The following codex entries are found in the Temple of Mythal in the Arbor Wilds in Dragon Age Inquisition. The Ascension of Gillenane. Gillenane kept herself apart from the people. She used her power to create animals none had ever seen. The skies teemed with her monsters, the land with her beasts. Andruil hunted them all, and after a year of killing, approached Gillenane with an offer. The gods would share their power with Gillenane, but only if she destroyed her creations, for they were too untamed to remain among the people. Gillenane agreed, and asked for 3 days to undo what she had made. On the first day, she struck down the monsters of the air, except those she presented to Andruil as a gift. On the second day, she drowned the giants of the sea, except those in deep waters where they were too well wrought, and pride stopped her hand. On the third day, she killed the beasts of the land, except the Hala, whose grace she loved above all else. This is how Gillenane was made youngest of the gods. Story of the elven god Gillenane. Author unknown. This codex entry tells us that Gillenane was very introverted, and one could say some sort of mad scientist, experimenting with living things, creating new creatures. It seems that the Evaneras struggled to contain her powers and ultimately decided it was better to make her an ally, possibly even fearing her mysterious powers of creation. Also, the reference to pride, with a capital P, stopping her from killing all her beasts in the sea, seems to be a reference to Solas, as his name translates to pride. What his motives were in stopping her from killing her sea monsters remain unknown. This elven writing, found in the Arbor Wilds, is so old there seems to be no way to learn what it means. There are whispers from the Well of Sorrows. It's impossible to understand the entire text, but certain parts suddenly reveal a shadow of their original meaning. His crime is high treason. He took on a form reserved for the gods and their chosen, and dared to fly in the shape of the divine. The sinner belongs to Dirthaman. He claims he took wings at the urging of Gillenane, and begs protection from Mythal. She does not show him favor, and will let Elgar'nan judge him. For one moment there is an image of a shifting, shadowy mass with blazing eyes, whose form may be one or many. Then it fades. This entry gives us the idea that Gillenane did not always follow the rules, even after ascending to join the Evaneras, and that she may have tried to share their powers of divinity with others. It seems that while she was one of the Evaneras, she always maintained some level of independence, pursuing her own ends. Not that I imagine by any means that the Evaneras were all of a like mind. There are many codex entries suggesting otherwise, but it seems that this was considered to be a very serious crime. as I suspect she taught someone to take the form of a dragon, a power that was likely reserved for the Avenirus alone. In the Jaws of Hakkon DLC, we find a shrine to both Andraste and Gillenane built by Inquisitor Ameridan inside a Tevinter ruin called Razakale's Reach.
Battle against the Dragon of the Avar. All is in place. I offer thanks to Gillenane, Halamother, and to Andraste, Maker Bride. As you were raised up from mortal men to stand with our creators, our makers, so raise me up now to defend this world.
It seems that in the rise of Andrastianism, some elves would connect their worship of Andraste to Gillenane, as they both had ascended to divinity. I also believe that it is no accident that the shrine to Gillenane was built in a building dedicated to the old god Razakale, Dragon of Mystery, as I suspect that there is a strong connection between Razakale and Gillenane. If you watched my video on Elgar'nan, God of Vengeance, you may have heard my speculations about the old gods being directly connected to the Avenirus. While it is a theory, I would like to include my thoughts regarding Gillenane's connection to an old god as well. As there are two remaining old gods that haven't become blighted archdemons, Lusithan, Dragon of Night, and Razakale, Dragon of Mystery, I speculated in my previous video that I believe there is a connection between Elgar'nan and Lusithan, the Dragon of Night. For Gillenane, I believe that she could be connected to the other remaining old god, Razakale, Dragon of Mystery. Gillenane certainly seems to be the most mysterious of the Avenirus, with a history and powers unique among the ancient elven gods. Like the other old gods, Razakale endorsed the attempts to reach the Golden City in the Fade, known in Andrastian legend to be the seat of the Maker, but was likely the ancient elven city of Arlathan that disappeared with the fall of the elves. Why would the old gods want the Tevinter Magisters to go to the prison that held the Avenirus? Possibly in hopes that it could free them, or their powers? One can't be certain, but paying close attention to the lore, I think it's hard to imagine that there isn't some sort of connection between the old gods and the Avenirus. The following entries are obtained after receiving strange items while exploring the Crossroads during the Trespasser DLC. The Hand That Cuts. This ring grows unusually warm when slipped onto a finger. It pulses slightly and steadily, as if in time with the wearer's heartbeat. The Eye That Weeps. This amulet is heavy for its size, and the metal is clammy and sticks jealously to the flesh. The gem in the center contains a liquid that glowers, a sluggish red in bright light. Condensation slowly forms on the gem's outer surface, no matter how many times it's wiped clean. The Bind That Guides. No matter how loosely this belt is tied, after a few steps it warps itself snugly around the waist. The stitching, while fine, is of a strange, thin thread that resembles hair and can't be cut even with the sharpest knife. The Skin That Stalks. The leather of this armor gives off a faint, living heat. It is heavier than it looks, but the weight and warmth are somehow comforting. The armor makes little noise in motion, and after a surprisingly short time, wearing it feels quite natural. There is definitely something unusually creepy going on with these items, and the one that crafted them. The next Codex entry is found in the Trespasser DLC for Dragon Age Inquisition, with each entry coming after obtaining one of the aforementioned items. Notes on Methods of Enchantment. The writing on these papers aches to be looked at, shimmering slightly as if under an enchantment. The notes are handwritten, but each letter is as perfectly uniform as from a printing press. Notes on the first attempt. Improper valances on the bindings woven into the materials led to a catastrophic unraveling. The first batch is lost, but I will have supplies brought in from the same stock to illuminate whether the imperfection is within the materials or the enchantment. Notes on the second attempt. Elegance eludes me. The aim is to improve the coordination of the body and sharpen the perception of the heart, but graphs do not live long enough to plumb their worth. The current process is ruin. This batch is lost. Begin again. Notes on the third attempt. 2 enchantments whose matrices should have meshed, caught. The combustion caused such damage it broke several previously forged pieces. There is now a resonance between them, however. And light on my thoughts. An enchantment linked in tandem, as the neck turns the head, or the wrist turns the hand? Notes on the fourth attempt. The weave goes smoothly, bound tightly between many items. The stress on the energy produces finer results than a singular enchantment. Using up the last of the stock was well worth it, as I explained to it as a courtesy before final work began. Adjustments to the underlay were a great success. and will allow the recipe to be made with material taken from lesser animals if the need arises. Below the letters, possibly in lieu of a signature, is the stamp of a stylized Hala head. Taken together, diagrams and ratios carefully inked at the bottom of the last of these notes could be turned into a schematic that replicates the creation of these artifacts. This codex, and the items that unlocked it, seem like they may have been made by Gillenane, especially with things that are revealed in later sources, in addition to the holostamp as a signature. It seems that she was experimenting with living creatures, likely sentient ones, to create unique crafting materials by crafting living creatures together. She even took the time to explain things to one of them, considering it a final courtesy. The author, likely Gillenane, is meticulous in her research and notes. Warning, the following section contains major spoilers for the short story The Horror of Hormak, from the book Tevinter Nights. While the short story from Tevinter Nights, The Horror of Hormak, doesn't explicitly name Gillenane, it seems like exactly the kind of thing she was known for. In The Horror of Hormak, a pair of Grey Wardens are sent to investigate and rescue a missing mining expedition in the Navarin forest. Throughout the story, they complain about the smell of brine and seawater. Under a mountain with 3 peaks twisting around each other, they find the lost dwarven Thaig of Hormak. Beneath the Thaig, they find more ruins with carvings that appear to be elven in origin. As they explore, they find some unusual wall carvings. But look, it's the same image repeated, with slight variations. She pointed to another painting that was partially intact. 3 figures, the supplicant, the queen, and the monster, except the person and the monster change, not a lot, but a little, enough to tell, but the priestess remains. She was right. The creature changed a bit each time, as did the figure, but the priestess remained the same, or at least almost the same. It was perhaps the oppressive nature of the place acting upon his worst fears, but it seemed to him that the priestess's smile grew a little wider and a little crueler with each subsequent image. Further in, they find a grand hall that appears to be entirely elven in origin, filled with mosaics. On the surface of the walls were carved massive bas-reliefs, running in 3 parallel bands and disappearing into the darkness in either direction. The detail was exquisite, and Ramesh quickly realized that what he had first thought to be some kind of paint or pigmentation was in fact millions of tiny gemstones set into the stone. The images engraved into the stone seemed almost alive, each one a perfectly frozen moment as the actors within marched through their stories. On the topmost band, stately elven kings and queens held court, their people kneeling before them in respectful supplication. On the middle, scenes of healing and succor, of disease and injury being drawn forth from the sick and dying by elven mages. And on the bottom, Aravels, far more elaborate and grandiose than any that Ramesh had ever seen, pulled by armies of Hala toward distant mountains, one of which, he realized with a start, was that same mountain that they were now beneath, the 3 jagged peaks that twisted around each other easily distinguishable in the detailed carvings. It was, taken as a whole, magnificent, and yet the more he stared at it, the more disquieting it became. There was something slightly off, something that set his teeth on edge and his palms itching for the comforting feel of his weapons. Not one specific thing, but a preponderance of little things, all adding up to an aura of quiet, deliberate menace. The striations on the columns, random at first, began to form patterns before Ramesh's eyes. The same symbol, the horns of a Hala, repeated on each column. The symbol seemed to shift, changing in an inexplicable way that made Ramesh's eyes water. He tore them away, focusing instead on the bas-reliefs that ran around the chamber, yet even they, suddenly, seemed wrong. The lowest band of carvings, the Hala pulling the Aravel, was off. The Hala were different, wrong. They had too many horns, for one, and a harder, more rounded look than was normal. A look that was almost insectile, and the horns themselves were longer and ridged. Organic somehow. And the Aravels were unlike any he had seen. The windows were barred, and they bore more resemblance to a prison ship than anything else. The middle band, with its scenes of healing, seemed now twisted, wrong. No longer did it seem as though the mages were drawing corruption and disease out of the wounded and infirm, but instead they forced it in, pushing it through and into the fallen bodies. The expressions on the faces of those elven rulers betrayed a contempt that was almost palpable, the beatific smiles edged with disgust and disdain for the creatures at their feet. And the subjects, far from kneeling in reverence, as Ramesh had first thought, seemed more to be cowering in terror. At the end of the chamber with the mosaics, they find another chamber. Rank upon rank of grotesqueries filled the cave. Each one was a twisted horror of body parts assembled seemingly at random. The fanged maw of a serpent rested atop the slender neck of a hollow, moving rapidly on the limbs of a Varteral. A massive spider scurried about, its many eyes replaced instead with the heads of a dozen serpents, each one dripping venom from exposed fangs. And at the center, a massive pool filled with a viscous gray fluid. The scent of brine wafted forth from it. Above it, a massive lyrium crystal hung suspended. It glowed with a sickly light, tinged with yellow and green. Streamers of energy flowed from it into the pool, sending it bubbling wherever it touched. They watched as a Hurlock walked towards the pool, stiff-legged. It broke the surface of the great ichor, which reacted instantly, flowing around the creature. In moments it was completely submerged. Out of the murk rose a cocoon, iridescent and pulsing with a green light. There was a hissing sound, a flash of light, and the cocoon shattered. Yet what came out was not a Hurlock. It had the head of one, but that head rested on the body of a massive drake. One of the most disturbing things found in the Chamber of Grotesqueries was some kind of mutated giant centipede described as follows. The creature reared up, hundreds of legs twitching spasmodically in the air, and Ramesh grabbed his sword tightly. Beside him, the hum of magic ready to be released. Ramesh had no illusions. This was a foe beyond him, but he would make it pay a steep price for his life. It crashed down toward him, and he braced himself for the impact, the crushing weight. It never came. Instead, the creature jerked, spasming in midair, and arching over the pair of wardens, smashing instead into the ground beside them. The lower half rocked, sending a series of small tremors through the cavern and bringing debris tumbling from the ceiling above. The creature twitched, thrashing side to side as if locked in battle, and started to turn. It fought against itself, its movement staccato and uneven, the actions tinged with unwillingness. Finally, whatever internal conflict had been waging was resolved and it turned in earnest. The massive bulk shifted, the segments retreated, and at the end of the creature, the head, or what seemed most like one, descended. And with it came the greatest horror of the day. Where the creature's head would be, should be, was instead a humanoid figure. He sat astride the creature. No, not astride it, Ramesh realized with revulsion. The figure was a part of it. The chitinous exterior flowed into the flesh. The lines between them blurred. His body had fused with the monstrosity, become one. In the face, Ramesh knew then, with horrifying clarity, what had happened to the man he'd risked everything to find. What Friedel's warnings had meant, and why she had killed herself rather than come back to this gruesome place. Before him, twisted and broken, was Warden Jovis. Warden Jovis seemed to be able to fight for control within the mutated horror. He is able to speak and communicate, though is clearly not in control of himself. When asked what happened to him, he responds, "We drank. Works differently for us. Can't just touch it. We need it inside. Takes a while. They turned us. 2 halves, 2 wholes, trying to be 2 ones. But I stayed me, and it hates that." It twitched, the cavern shaking in sympathy. Not forever, not for long. Just now, enough. The buzz returned to his voice, insistent. "And we waited for you. Oh yes, now you come." The creature screamed, and Jovis's voice came back. "Can't let this out. Got to. Hurry it. Hurry me." The words came even more slowly. Each one being forced through whatever will battled Jovis's for control of the creature. She cannot have it. Not again. Locked for a reason. In the end, Warden Ramesh manages to escape, collapsing the mountain with lyrium charges. But as he escapes, he remembers something. The mountain he'd brought down. The one that buried that nightmare under thousands of tons of rock was not the only one to which Airvels brought their prey. There had been, before the images repeated, 11 others. With what we know of Gillenane, this sounds like the kind of thing she was known for, creating monsters. It seems that Hormak, and 11 other similar locations were used to transform elves and other prisoners into monsters. These locations were likely the original 12 Great Dwarven Taigs. The pool seems to bear some similarities to the Well of Sorrows found in the Temple of Mythal and Dragon Age Inquisition. It seems to draw people in, to drink from it, like some sort of compulsion. We know that in the Veilguard, Gillenane, alongside Elgranon, are freed from their prison in the Black City in the Fade, when Rook, Varric and party interrupt the ritual Solus was performing, releasing the blighted elven gods. We see Gillenane in multiple trailers, and she is very clearly deformed, more so than what we see in Elbernon, though we haven't gotten a good look at him yet. We know that she has at least 2 blighted dragons at her command. She is obviously very powerful, and uses her tentacles to quickly dispatch enemies. So let's recap what we know so far. It seems that Gillenane was some sort of mad scientist mage who experimented with at the very least animals and elves, creating hybrids and different kinds of monsters. This led to her ascension to the Evaneris, provided she got rid of her monsters, with the exception of those she had gifted to Andruil. Pride, which could refer to Solus, stopped her from destroying some of the monsters in the sea, for reasons we don't yet understand. It appears that she was also using her powers to create unique crafting materials from living things. It seems that Gillenane may have been chosen to ascend to the ranks of the Evaneris because they feared her creations and knew that they would be better off with her as an ally than as an enemy. The Hala she is credited with being the mother of have some strange features. Most notably, their horns seem to bear a lot of resemblance to strands of DNA. I wonder if it was a clue that they were a creature that may have been spliced together, as we see so many other examples of. I would like to share another thought regarding Andruil and the Blight. Codex entry: Elven god Andruil. One day, Andruil grew tired of hunting mortal men and beasts. She began stalking the Forgotten Ones, wicked things that thrive in the abyss. Yet even a god should not linger there, and each time she entered the void, Andruil suffered longer and longer periods of madness after returning. Andruil put on armor made of the void and forgot her true face. She made weapons of darkness, and plague ate her lands. She howled things meant to be forgotten, and the other gods became fearful Andruil would hunt them in turn. So Mythal spread rumors of a monstrous creature and took the form of a great serpent, waiting for Andruil at the base of a mountain. When Andruil came, Mythal sprang on the hunter. They fought for 3 days and nights, Andruil's slashing deep gouges into the serpent's hide, but Mythal's magic sapped Andruil's strength, and stole her knowledge of how to find the void. After this, the great hunter could never make her way back to the abyss, and peace retired. Translated from Ancient Elven found in the Arbor Wilds. Source unverified. This entry clearly depicts Andruil bringing back some sort of blight from the abyss. The Evaneris were dealing with something that sounds a lot like the Blight. It makes me wonder if Gillenane started experimenting with the Blight after Andruil had become blighted, as there is obviously a close connection between the two. Was it Gillenane that perfected and weaponized it, creating the Darkspawn to unleash on her subterranean enemies before she was locked away by the Dreadwolf and Harel? As the creator of monsters, was Gillenane responsible for the creation of the Darkspawn? She does bear some resemblance to a broodmother, though not nearly as hideously deformed. Could she also be responsible for the creation of the Qunari? Possibly by combining elves with features of dragons?
You know, Qunari hold dragons sacred. Well, as much as we hold anything sacred. Atashi, the glorious ones. That's our word for them. Atashi.
Why do you think the Qunari think of dragons that way?
Well, you know how we have horns. We kind of look more dragony than most people. Maybe it's that. But a few of the Ben Hathrath have this crazy old theory. See, the Tamasrans control who we mate with. They breed us for jobs like you breed dogs or horses. What if they mixed in some dragon a long time ago? Maybe drinking the blood, maybe magic, I don't know. But something in that dragon we killed spoke to me.
Both of these seem possible. What about the scaled ones? There is the following codex entry found in the Deep Roads during the Descent DLC. As it's a long entry, I will just present the information I think is relevant. Chronicles of a Forgotten War. The day after leaving Kad Halash, we noticed a change. The Deep Roads were practically abandoned. Torches would suddenly go out, leaving us to stumble through the dark and trip over discarded caravans. Then came the attacks, hard and fast. Father was one of the first. We heard breathing, slow and heavy, from a creature much larger than us. Father held out his arm and grabbed the front of my armor to make me stop. I saw its shadow move, darker than the darkness. and then my body jerked forward. It left Father's arm hanging, still grasping my chest plate. The Scaled Ones. I can't remember who came up with the name, but it stuck. Drogue had been lighting a torch when one attacked, and we finally caught a glimpse of something other than shadows. In the flame's light, we saw a man's body, like those of the Imperium humans, but covered in scales. It wore armor, and even had a dagger hanging from its hip. Its jaws wrapped around Drogue's face and twisted. The crunch of his neck breaking seemed to echo down the deep roads. The torch fell from his hands, and we lashed out. I swung my axe with all my might, but it bounced off the Scaled One's armor, the impact ricocheting up my arms. It let out a roar, then more attacked. From the light of the fallen torch, I guessed there was a score of them, all wearing armor and carrying weapons as sharp as their teeth and talons. The one that killed Drogue barked orders I didn't understand. I kept swinging. Othon, the best of us, made the first kill by splitting a Scaled One's head open. There was a strange silence, as if after an upset in the proving grounds, and it hit me that these beasts were not used to seeing one of their own die. Drogue's killer growled and stamped out the torch. The Scaled Ones retreated into the darkness. The Scaled Ones had set up a camp at an intersection in the deep roads. In the center, there was a golden altar fashioned in the shape of fire. A chill swept through me. On the tip of each flame hung the corpses of those we'd lost, including Father and Drogue. They'd been drained of blood, leaving only bone wrapped in gray skin. A roped Scaled One stood before the altar. Its voice was different from the others, softer, almost feminine. It chanted, and raised a basin of blood towards the altar. The other Scaled Ones bowed low. The robed Scaled One produced fire from its palm and mouth and ignited the blood. Othon grabbed my arm and motioned for us to climb down. We returned to the rest of the company, where he relayed what we had witnessed. We would rest for an hour, regain our strength, and strike. The memory of Father's sagging, emptied face kept me awake. The hour passed slowly, but it did pass. Othon led us down the path to the overlook. I readied my axe for blood and steeled myself for the sight of the altar, but it wasn't there. The camp, Father and Drogue, the Scaled Ones, all gone. Only the basin remained, charred around the edges. From Chronicles of a Forgotten War, author unknown. Again, we have what appears to be some sort of hybridized humanoid, which makes me wonder if Gillenane may have had something to do with this. Although there are other possible explanations, such as dragon cultists, which would make just as much sense. I think it's worth including here, especially as we see depictions of such creatures in the Dales during Dragon Age Inquisition, making me think there could be a connection to the elves. Also, what about the Executors, who apparently smell of the sea and attempt to keep their appearance hidden? From the short story, Dreadwolf Take You, in the book To Venture Nights. Enough! The voice that came from the Executor could have been male or female, young or old. It was less a voice than the idea of a voice, rendered acceptably, but no more. We came because we possess a shared interest in the wolf. What he is does not concern us, the Executor said, the words neutral but carrying a weight that made the wine in its cup ripple. We across the ocean care only for his goals and means of accomplishing them. In the middle of the story, Solas petrifies the Executor before it can share its knowledge, without the others noticing, and later offers a warning to Charter about the Executors. Excellent work on the Executor, Charter said. You petrified him, but not his robes. I would caution you in dealing with those across the sea, he said. They are dangerous. Their smelling of the sea causes me to wonder if they are somehow connected to the experiments we find in the Horror of Hormak. And as Solas seems aware of them, are they perhaps linked to the Evaniras somehow? With the fact that they smell like the sea, and also keep their appearance hidden, along with some other unusual traits, it makes me wonder if they are somehow connected to Gillenane. And finally, what about griffins? Whenever we encounter animals with hybridized features, I'm gonna wonder if Gillenane had a hand in their creation. We know that some of the monsters of the sky had been gifted to Andrul. Could griffins have been among her early creations? If the Evaniras became blighted after the creation of griffins, it could explain why they hate the blight so much. Here is a quote about the griffins' hatred for the blight and their reaction to the Grey Warden joining ritual, from the book Dragon Age: The Last Flight. Griffins, however, did not respond the same way. The great beasts went into an uncontrollable, rabid rage when subjected to the joining. Their explosive violence was lethal not only to everyone in their vicinity, but to their own selves. The hatred that griffins felt for Darkspawn carried over to the taint in their own veins. It caused the noble creatures to tear their own bodies apart in wild spasms of loathing. The horror and the tragedy of the early experiments had convinced the Grey Wardens to stay far away from that path. It was the actions of a blood mage trying to use blood magic to put the griffins through the joining that caused the extinction of the griffins during the Fourth Blight. Though as we learn in the last flight, there was an uncorrupted clutch of eggs sealed away, which is why we will see griffins returning in the Veilguard. And I have one more Codex entry from Dragon Age Inquisition. Constellation Equinor. Referred to as the Stallion in common parlance, the constellation Equinor has historically been depicted as either a rearing horse or a seated griffin. Some scholars speculate that the constellation's original image was that of a Hala, which could indicate a deliberate supplantation of the constellation's original representation as Gillenane, the elven goddess, also known as the mother of the Hala. However, as horses had great significance to early Neomenian culture, from which the ancient Imperium descended, this speculation is largely considered unfounded. From a study of the Dojian astronomy by Sister Oran Petrarchius. While this codex entry can hardly be called conclusive, I do find it interesting that the constellation connected to Gillenane and her Hala also has a connection to griffins. Could be random, or could be a subtle clue. And that is all I have for today on Gillenane, mother of the Hala. I hope you found this information intriguing. I'm very excited to learn more in Dragon Age: The Veilguard, which is scheduled to release at the end of the month. I will likely make an update to this video after playing through the new game, as certainly there will be more information revealed, and we will see how my theories hold up. Thank you for stopping by Lorekeeper Sanctum. I am your Lorekeeper. I hope you will come back soon, and I hope that you learned something new. If you like this content and would like to encourage me to make more in the future, please hit the like and subscribe buttons. It really helps out a lot. Until next time, friends and fans of fantasy.
Gillenane.
Consume their flesh! Shatter their bones!